Good evening. Tonight we walk beneath a moon that feels too heavy for the sky, and you can almost taste the dust of Mount Olympus drifting on the air. You're standing at the edge of a cradle where thunder once struck, where a baby cried loud enough to bother gods. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story of Heracles doesn't begin with glory. It begins with gossip. Zeus, king of the gods, and self-appointed expert in poor decisions, disguised himself yet again, this time as Amphitryon, a mortal general to seduce Amphitryon's wife, Alcmene. Classic Zeus move. When Hera, his long-suffering queen, found out, she didn't direct her fury at her husband, who absolutely deserved it. No, she went after the baby. That baby, half divine and inconveniently adorable, was destined to shake the heavens. You picture the scene. A quiet night in Thebes, Alcmene clutching her newborn. The candles tremble, the air thickens, and two serpents slither silently across the floor, Hera's little welcome gifts. Before anyone can scream, baby Heracles grabs one serpent in each tiny fist and strangles them, giggling. You can almost hear the sound, disturbingly sweet and horrifyingly strong. Historians still argue whether that episode symbolized divine favor or just mythic exaggeration. But either way, toddler Heracles was already breaking records. His mortal father, Amphitryon, trained him in combat, while gods kept dropping in like nosy uncles with suspiciously fancy toys. Hermes gave him wit, Apollo music, Athena strategy, basically a divine starter pack. Yet every gift came with an invisible thread leading back to Hera's jealousy. Even his name, Heracles, meant the glory of Hera. Irony doesn't come sharper than that. As a young man, Heracles wasn't some spotless hero. He was impulsive, full of appetite, and, rumor has it, once killed his music teacher in a fit of frustration. Imagine being so bad at the lyre that you commit manslaughter, but gods tend to forgive what mortals can't. He married Megara, a Theban princess, built a family, and for a while, you might think head escaped the curse hovering over him. Then, one quiet evening, the world tilted. Hera slipped a fog into his mind, thick, invisible, irresistible. You feel it. The walls bend, the hearth's glow flickers into red. Heracles' vision twists. He sees enemies where there are only loved ones. In that moment of divine madness, he destroys everything he built. When the haze clears, the silence around him is unbearable. The ancient storytellers don't dwell on the details. They understood that grief like this can't be narrated, only endured. Heracles falls to his knees, begging for a punishment worthy of his crimes. And that's when the thread of his life tangles into prophecy. The Oracle of Delphi, speaking with Apollo's voice, commands him to serve King Eurystheus of Tiryns, to perform a series of impossible labors until his soul is cleansed. You can imagine the look on his face. A warrior who's fought monsters since infancy, now sentenced to fetch things, clean things, chase things, all because the gods think he needs therapy. Historians still debate whether the 12 labors were originally 12 separate myths or one epic stitched together later. But whatever their origin, they turned Heracles into something more than a man. He became a blueprint for endurance, a hero who failed spectacularly, repented completely, and worked harder than any god ever dared. And so, as dawn breaks over a land that's half myth and half memory, Heracles sets out on a road lined with prophecies and traps. You hear the crunch of sand beneath his feet, the whisper of the oracle still echoing behind him. Go, and cleanse your soul through toil. The first labor waits in the shadows of Nemea, a lion whose hide no blade can cut, whose roar shakes the hills. But Heracles doesn't flinch. Maybe he's too exhausted to fear anymore. Maybe that's what redemption sounds like. The steady rhythm of footsteps walking toward an impossible fight. You, standing beside him in imagination, can almost feel the chill creeping down your spine as he grips his club and whispers to himself not a prayer, not a boast, but a promise to make the gods regret ever testing him. The madness doesn't just fade. It lingers like smoke in your lungs. You can still taste the iron bitterness of regret when Heracles trudges toward Delphi. Desperate for meaning, you follow behind him, stepping through dust that hasn't felt rain in weeks. His hands, those same ones that once cradled his children, now hang heavy at his sides. You almost want to tell him to stop, to rest, but you know it's useless. No one tells Heracles anything. The temple of Apollo rises from the rock, white, and still as if even marble holds its breath. Inside, the oracle waits, her eyes clouded by prophecy. She's not afraid of him, even though most mortals are. Maybe because she knows this broken man in front of her is about to become legend. Heracles kneels, head bowed. He doesn't plead. He just says, "Tell me what I must do." And Apollo's voice answers through her, smooth as a river hiding an undertow. He must serve King Eurystheus, cousin, rival, and frankly, bureaucrat extraordinaire. 12 impossible labors, each one meant to strip away his pride and rebuild his soul. You can almost hear the audience of gods snickering Zeus, lounging somewhere above, watching his half-mortal son get sentenced to celestial community service. Hera, of course, is delighted. She's the invisible puppeteer behind this arrangement, whispering ideas into Eurystheus' cowardly ear. Historians still argue whether this myth reflects ancient Greek ideas of atonement or just divine spite turned into moral allegory. Either way, it's a story of punishment shaped like redemption. Heracles doesn't argue. He doesn't beg for leniency. He just tightens the lion skin cloak around his shoulders, still warm from the beast he hasn't yet killed. If time loops the way myths do and sets his jaw, you can tell he's done being the god's plaything. If he has to crawl through hell to find peace, then hell's in for a rough day. When he reaches Tiryns, Eurystheus greets him like a man hosting a wolf in his living room. Hess, smug but terrified, hiding behind walls, scribes, and an ego inflated by divine politics. "You'll serve me," he says, trying not to shake. "You'll do what I command. The gods themselves demand it." Heracles just nods. There's no fire in his eyes, no thunderclap of divine rage, just a quiet acceptance that makes Eurystheus even more nervous. You almost feel sorry for the king. Almost. The first command comes quickly. Kill the Nemean Lion, a beast whose hide no weapon can pierce, whose cave reeks of death and sulfur. It's a challenge crafted to destroy him, and that's the point. Hera wants him humiliated, devoured, erased. Instead, she's about to create her worst nightmare, a hero who learns from pain. But before Heracles can set out, there's one small, strange interlude that most retellings skip the purification ritual. In Greek custom, after bloodshed, a man must cleanse himself before approaching the gods again. So Heracles walks to the river, kneels, and submerges his head in the freezing current. The water bites at his skin. The world blurs. When he emerges, he's gasping, reborn, trembling. The sun catches the drops clinging to his hair like molten gold. It's a cinematic moment, ancient myth playing like a modern montage. You can almost hear the soundtrack swell. A mortal man, freshly scarred, stepping back into the world. The oracle's words still pulse in his chest. Endure, and you will be free. He heads out toward Nemea, where the hills crouch under thick clouds. Travelers whisper of bones littering the ground, of shepherds who vanish into the caves and never return. The lion, they say, was born of Typhon's blood brother to monsters, cousin to chaos. It kills for fun, not food. As Heracles walks, he passes old farmers who close their doors at the sight of him. They've seen too many heroes die chasing myths. One old woman drops her amphora and mutters a prayer under her breath, eyes wide with pity. You notice Heracles doesn't even flinch. He's beyond shame now. That night, by his campfire, he stares into the flames and carves a crude club from an olive tree trunk. It's simple, heavy, and practical, the kind of weapon a man builds when he's done trusting anything fancy. He tests its weight in his palm, nods once, and smiles for the first time in weeks. There's a kind of calm before each labor, a heartbeat of silence, where you can feel destiny coiling. Tomorrow hell faced the lion, but tonight the forest hums with quiet life, indifferent to gods and guilt. An owl calls somewhere overhead, and you imagine Athena herself watching, amused. Historians still debate whether the oracle's decree represented divine justice or manipulation, but you can sense the deeper truth. Heracles isn't seeking forgiveness from the gods. He's trying to forgive himself. Every step toward Nemea is a step away from madness, though he doesn't yet know that redemption rarely looks heroic. It looks like exhaustion, perseverance, and, sometimes, wrestling monsters just to stay alive. The embers fade, the stars blink wider, and somewhere far off, a lion roars. It's not just a sound, it's a challenge. You feel it vibrating through the air, a promise that tomorrow will be louder, bloodier, unforgettable. Heracles doesn't stir. He closes his eyes, breathes once, and whispers, "Let it come." Morning fog clings to the hills of Nemea like ghostly breath, and you walk beside Heracles as the air turns thick with animal musk and damp stone. The forest around you is silent in that unsettling way that only happens when every living thing has learned to stay very, very quiet. Somewhere ahead, something enormous moves, the kind of movement you feel in your ribs before you hear it. You can imagine Eurystheus back in his palace, sipping watered wine, thinking this will be over soon. Hera probably smirks beside him, invisible but smug, expecting her favorite mortal punching bag to end up as lion chow. But you and I know better. You've seen what guilt can do when it hardens into purpose. The Nemean lion isn't just an animal. It's myth concentrated into muscle and roar. According to old tales, it was born from the monstrous union of Echidna and Typhon, the same nightmare parents who spawned the Hydra, Cerberus, and pretty much every creature that ruins Greek picnics. Its hide is so tough that swords bounce off like raindrops. Arrows, they just annoy it. Historians still argue whether this story was meant to represent the sun's invincibility or a local cult's favorite mascot. But myth doesn't care about footnotes. Heracles enters the valley quietly, scanning the ground. He spots paw prints deep enough to fill with water. The air reeks of carrion. You can almost taste the copper tang. And then there it is. The lion steps out from the shadows, mane glowing faintly gold beneath the pale light. Its eyes are molten amber, pupils narrowing as it studies him. The ground trembles under its paws. For a second, you wonder who's hunting whom. Heracles readies his bow and fires, one arrow, then another, each whistling cleanly through the air, and each snapping uselessly against the creature's hide. The lion roars, so loud that a flock of birds explodes from the trees in panic. You feel the vibration in your teeth. Heracles lowers his bow, exasperated. "Fine," he mutters. "Well, do it your way." He grabs his club, just a gnarled trunk of olive wood, and charges. The lion meets him halfway, claws flashing, fangs bared. The impact is bone-rattling. You can picture the scene in slow motion, Heracles ducking under a swipe, rolling in the dirt, swinging that club with enough force to crack thunder. The blow lands squarely on the lion's skull. The beast staggers but doesn't fall. That's when Heracles notices something. The creature flinched toward the cave mouth. Two openings, one on each side of a low ridge. A double entrance, the kind of lair designed by nature for ambush. So he does something clever, which is not usually his brand. He blocks one entrance with massive stones, trapping the lion inside. Then he creeps through the other opening, torch in hand, and waits for the sound of breathing. Inside, the air is thick, hot, and foul. You can hear the lion shifting in the dark, tail lashing. There's a heartbeat-long pause, then a blur of movement. The beast lunges, and Heracles meets it head-on. The club clatters to the ground. The torch dies. In the pitch black, it's just flesh, fur, and fury. He locks his arms around the lion's throat, muscles straining, every tendon burning. The creature thrashes, claws scraping his shoulders, but he holds on, inch by inch, breath by breath, until the roaring stops. When he emerges from the cave, dawn has returned, pale and thin. Hes, covered in dust and blood, dragging the carcass behind him. But there's a problem. His sword won't cut the hide. Every blade he tries snaps or blunts. So being Heracles, he improvises again. He uses one of the lion's own claws to skin it, discovering the only weapon sharp enough to pierce its armor was part of the creature itself. There's a metaphor in there somewhere, probably about facing your demons with their own teeth. He slings the hide across his shoulders, the head forming a hood. The moment he does, the legend clicks into place. You can almost hear the cinematic thunk of destiny locking shut. The Nemean Lion is dead. The myth of Heracles, the indestructible, begins. When he returns to Tiryns, Eurystheus refuses to come out of his palace. He sends a messenger instead, announcing that future victories must be presented from a safe distance, like a nervous manager trying to handle HR for a demigod. Hera's less amused. She's just realized that every challenge she throws only makes him stronger. Historians still debate whether the lion's skin symbolized divine protection or masculine vanity. Some say Heracles wore it as armor. Others claim it became a reminder of his own darkness, a trophy of the monster within. Either way, it sticks his silhouette. The lion's mane, framing his face, becomes an icon carved into centuries of art. And as night settles again over Nemea, the cave grows quiet, the earth reclaiming what was taken. You picture Heracles sitting by his fire, the lion's pelt draped across his back, staring into the embers. For a moment, he looks peaceful, like a man who's finally done something right. But you know the truth. This is only the first of 12. The gods are just warming up. A breeze rustles the trees, carrying the scent of pine and ash. Somewhere in the darkness, another roar answers from far away, a hint of the Hydra waiting in her swamp. Heracles glances toward the sound, sighs once, and starts packing his gear. You can almost hear him mutter, "One down." The road south smells of salt and decay. You follow Heracles through the marshes of Lerna, a landscape where even the air seems reluctant to breathe. The reeds whisper secrets you don't want translated, and somewhere ahead, the water bubbles like a cauldron, too warm, too alive. That's your first clue the Hydra's close. Word had spread fast. A serpent with 9 heads, each one spitting venom strong enough to melt bronze. Local shepherds told tales of travelers dissolving into the swamp, bones sinking with a hiss. Of course, Eurystheus thought this would be the perfect next step for Heracles' spiritual growth. Hera agreed enthusiastically. She even adopted the Hydra as her personal pet project, because nothing says divine grudge like bioengineering a monster. Heracles arrives at sunset. Mist crawls low over the ground, glowing faintly green where the Hydra's poison seeps into the mud. The surface ripples as if the lake itself were breathing. You can feel the damp weight in your lungs, a slow squeeze that makes every inhale deliberate. Her's not alone this time. His nephew Iolaus has come along, cheerful, loyal, and just young enough to still think this is going to be fun. Historians still argue whether Iolaus was truly his nephew or more of a mythic sidekick invented later, but either way, his optimism will come in handy, because optimism is the only thing you can wield against something that grows 2 heads every time you cut one off. Heracles sets down his club and stringing his bow. The first arrow hits the water with a faint thunk, and the Hydra rises. You can hear it before you see it, the wet slap of scales, the rumbling hiss that vibrates through your spine. Then the heads breach the surface, 9 sinuous necks crowned with snapping jaws, eyes glowing like coals in a storm. It's like watching hatred find anatomy. The first head lunges. Heracles sidesteps and swings his club with such force that the impact sends a splash higher than the trees. 1 head falls, but from the bloody stump, 2 more sprout instantly, thrashing. "Well," Iolaus mutters, "that's inconvenient." Heracles grunts something unprintable and keeps swinging. You can smell the poison now, sweet and acrid, like rotting flowers dipped in fire. The swamp hisses wherever the blood touches it, carving pits in the earth. Heracles realizes he's losing ground. For every head he smashes, 2 more rise, shrieking. The creature's body coils around him, tightening. Mud sucks at his feet, and then, spark of inspiration, he shouts to Iolaus, "Fire!" The boy, bless him, doesn't hesitate. He grabs a torch from their camp and dashes forward. As Heracles tears off ahead, Iolaus sears the stump with flames, cauterizing the wound. The Hydra's scream splits the air, part agony, part disbelief. For the first time, it's afraid. They work in rhythm: strike, burn, strike, burn, until smoke veils the swamp like incense at a sacrificial altar. Finally, only one head remains, the immortal one, black and slick, eyes burning brighter than the rest. Heracles smashes it down with his club, pins it under his heel, and chops it off with his sword. He can't kill it, so he buries it beneath a massive rock, sealing it forever beneath the toxic mud. When the battle ends, the swamp is silent, except for the faint crackle of dying fire. Heracles, streaked with soot and poison, stands panting beside the steaming carcass. He dips his arrows into the Hydra's blood, the liquid hissing against the metal tips. From now on, every shot he fires will carry death faster than any god's curse. That's not just victory, that's innovation. Historians still debate whether this story reflects the taming of a literal marsh plague. Some say the Hydra symbolized disease spreading through the swamps, but you can't shake the feeling it's also a warning. Sometimes, solving one problem means becoming something a little more dangerous yourself. As Heracles and Iolaus pack up, Hera watches from above. Livid, Shed sent a giant crab to help the Hydra because clearly what the monster needed was backup from seafood. Heracles crushed it without noticing. Later, Hera would immortalize both beasts in the night sky, Hydra and Cancer, glimmering as trophies of her failure. When they return to Tiryns, Eurystheus refuses to count the labor. "You had help," he whines, hiding behind his scribes again. Heracles doesn't argue. He just shrugs, because he's starting to realize something vital. The labors aren't for the king. They're for him. Each one peels away a layer of arrogance, leaving something quieter underneath, something that understands pain as a teacher. That night, they camp on a hill above the marsh. The stars pulse faintly through the smoke, and the ground below still oozes poison. Iolaus dozes beside the fire, dreaming the kind of easy dreams you only get before you understand what heroism costs. Heracles sits awake, scraping his club clean, eyes distant. You can almost hear the thoughts grinding behind them. How many monsters left? How many parts of himself still need killing? A breeze sighs through the reeds, and the reflection of the moon ripples over the stagnant water. The buried head of the Hydra stirs faintly beneath the rock, as if remembering what it was. But Heracles doesn't look back. He's already thinking of the next labor of golden hooves flashing through moonlight, and a year-long chase that will test patience more than strength. He stands, shoulders the club, and whispers into the dark. "Let her keep her monsters. I'll take the rest." The swamp fades behind you like a bad dream you can't quite shake. And now the air smells cleaner: pine resin, wet stone, distant snow. Heracles moves north into the forests of Arcadia, his lion skin cloak whispering with each step. The next task sounds easy on paper. Capture the Ceryneian Hind. No killing, no blood, just catch a deer. After all those serpents and roars, this sounds like a vacation. Spoiler, it isn't. Shay's sacred to Artemis, goddess of the hunt, and let's be honest, someone you do not want to upset. Her coat gleams like polished gold, her antlers shimmer like silver filigree, and she's faster than any arrow ever fired. Historians still argue whether this was a real ancient species of deer or pure poetic invention. But whatever she was, she ran like light over water. Eurystheus' instructions were simple: bring her back alive. Alive being the operative word, which means no cheating with poison arrows this time. Hera probably suggested this one too, hoping Heracles would accidentally anger Artemis and get vaporized for poaching divine wildlife. A solid plan, really. Heracles sets out at dawn, tracking hoofprints barely visible in the frost. You follow close behind, hearing his breathing fall into rhythm with the heartbeat of the forest. Every rustle feels like movement, every shadow might be gold. For days, he finds nothing. The Hind is a ghost, always a few steps ahead, as if mocking him. Weeks turn into months. The pursuit drags through winter. You can see the toll on him. His beard thickens, his clothes tear, his boots wear thin. He crosses rivers, climbs ridges, loses her trail, finds it again. Sleep becomes a rumor. At one point, he mutters, him chasing sunlight. You're not sure if he's joking. One night, he finally spots her drinking from a silver stream under a crescent moon. You hold your breath. The sight is mesmerizing. Her reflection glimmers brighter than the stars. Heracles raises his bow, hesitates. He knows one wrong move could earn him Artemis' eternal wrath. So he does something different. He waits. All night, perfectly still, muscles locked, heart slowed, the hind lifts her head, flicks her ears, and then bounds away too fast to follow. But now he knows her rhythm, her patterns, her favorite paths. The chase becomes ritual. He learns her world inch by inch, the scent of time in the air before dawn, the sound of her hooves echoing across stone, the glint of sunlight on distant fur. This is the closest the myth ever gets to tenderness. A monster slayer learning patience. Historians still debate whether the story was a moral about restraint or ecological harmony. But you can almost feel the change in him. The rage that once burned through every task now cools into focus. After a full year, the opportunity comes. At the edge of a mountain pass, he spots her sprinting across a narrow ravine. He nocks an arrow, but not to kill, just to startle. The shaft flies, grazing her flank, and she stumbles. In one fluid motion, he leaps forward, traps her gently in his arms. Her heart thrums against his chest like a drum. She doesn't fight, just stares at him with eyes that seem to see too much. Then comes the part no one warns him about. Artemis herself appears, stepping from the trees like dawn, taking human form. The air sharpens, every leaf stands still. You can feel her fury before she speaks. That creature is mine. Heracles lowers his gaze. He could lie, but lying to a goddess usually ends badly. I didn't mean harm, he says softly. I'm bound by a king's order, not my will. Artemis studies him. Maybe she senses the truth, the weariness, the guilt, the strange respect glowing in his eyes. Finally, she nods. Then swear shall come to no harm, and ill let you take her, but return her when you're done. He bows, relief almost breaking his voice. I swear it. When he carries the hind back to Tiryns, Eurystheus is practically bouncing with anticipation, eager to display his trophy. But Heracles doesn't even let him touch it. You wanted her seen, not kept. He growls, holding the reins firm. The golden deer's eyes flash in the sunlight. Then, before the king can complain, Heracles turns her loose. She leaps away, disappearing into the hills in a burst of light, the echo of her hooves fading like laughter. Eurystheus is furious. Hera likely throws another celestial tantrum, and Heracles just smiles faintly, because for once, he's done something without violence. The gods won't understand it, but you do the quiet satisfaction of doing something right for its own sake. That night, he camps beside the same silver stream where he first saw her. The stars ripple on the surface like liquid fire. He sets down his bow, not as a warrior's tool, but as an offering. A frog croaks somewhere nearby. The world exhales. He closes his eyes, and, for the first time, since the madness that started all this, he sleeps without dreaming. Maybe that's what redemption looks like in motion, not a triumphant fanfare, but the soft sound of hooves vanishing into moonlight. By the time the next order arrives, Heracles is already halfway through a bowl of lentil stew, probably hoping the king has run out of ideas. No such luck. Eurystheus, hiding behind his polished scribes as usual, announces the fourth labor. Capture the Erymanthian Boar. Alive, of course. Because apparently, Heracles' entire redemption arc doubles as a wildlife relocation program. The boar, rumor says, lives high on Mount Erymanthus, a peak so cold and jagged that even goats file complaints. It's not just any pig, it's a creature the size of a small wagon, tusks like ivory scythes, eyes red as coals. The locals swear it can uproot trees and toss hunters like kindling. Hera might not have invented this one, but you can bet she's enjoying the show. Heracles slings his lion pelt, grabs his club, and trudges toward the snowline. You can almost feel the air thinning with altitude, that dry sting in your lungs as he climbs. The forest fades into rock, the rock into white. Every step crunches. Hes not just fighting beasts anymore, Hes wrestling exhaustion, weather, and a diet consisting mostly of regret. Halfway up the mountain, he stops at the cave of Pholus, a centaur friend. Now, centaurs have a reputation. Half man, half horse, full chaos. But Pholus is different, quiet, scholarly, the kind who brews herbal tea instead of picking fights. He welcomes Heracles, offers warmth and conversation, and, most importantly, wine. Now, here is where things get delightfully messy. The wine isn't just any wine. It's communal stock owned by all centaurs. Pholus hesitates, muttering, "Maybe we shouldn't open this." Heracles grins the way. Only a man who's wrestled a lion and punched a hydra can. Just one jar. The cork pops, and the scent drifts through the cold air. Rich, sweet, legendary. Within minutes, other centaurs appear, drawn like moths to vintage nectar. They're not happy. Imagine showing up to find someone drinking your sacred group bottle without permission. Things escalate fast. Arrows fly. Hooves thunder. Heracles shouts, "It's just wine," which, historically, never calms anyone down. In the confusion, he fires poisoned arrows, forgetting that hydra venom doesn't discriminate between monster and friend. Centaurs fall, groaning. Even wise old Chiron, mentor of heroes, gets nicked by a stray arrow and retreats in agony. The myth turns suddenly somber. Even good intentions can sour when strength outruns wisdom. Historians still argue whether this scene was meant as moral commentary or just an excuse for ancient slapstick. But either way, it sticks. When the smoke clears, Pholus, bless him, tries to inspect one of the arrows out of curiosity. He drops it. It pierces his hoof, and that's the end of him. You can almost hear Heracles sigh. He buries his friend beneath the mountain, murmuring something that sounds suspiciously like an apology. Then he remembers. There's still a giant boar to catch. He presses onward into the blizzard. The wind howls, the snow blinds. You can see his breath frosting the air like a ghost escaping his chest. Hours pass. Then a sound, a snort that rumbles through the valley like thunder. The boar bursts through the fog, massive, tusks gleaming, breath steaming. Heracles doesn't bother with subtlety. He gives chase, his feet sliding over ice, each exhale sharp enough to cut. The beast charges uphill, snorting fury. Heracles grabs a tree root, swings himself around, and slams into its flank. The impact echoes. Snow erupts in plumes. He wrestles it like a man trying to subdue an avalanche. The boar thrashes, gouging trenches in the snow, but Heracles digs in. Inch by inch, he forces it backward, toward a ravine. Then, with a grunt that shakes the mountain, he flips the beast into a snowdrift deep enough to trap it. Its snorts turn to muffled growls beneath the powder. Heracles, panting, ties its legs with rope and drags it downhill, like a proud but exhausted farmer hauling a particularly evil potato. When he returns to Tiryns, Eurystheus does what Eurystheus always does. Panics. Seeing the monstrous boar snorting at his gates, he shrieks and dives into a giant storage jar to hide a detail so silly it must be true. You almost wish Hera had been there to see her champion of bureaucracy reduced to a man stuck in a vase. Historians still debate whether this labor symbolized the taming of winters, chaos, or a moral about perseverance. But the humor's undeniable. Even heroes have days that feel like dragging a pig through a snowstorm. That night, after handing off the boar, Heracles sits by the fire, thawing his frozen fingers. The mountain wind still whistles in his ears, but beneath it hums something softer. A memory of laughter shared over forbidden wine, of friendship and loss. He raises a cup of water, maybe in quiet toast, and says, "To Pholus, hello, I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. Thousands of them, divine and mortal, churning out mountains of filth for 30 years without a single cleanup. Imagine the world's worst barn crossed with a biohazard site. Historians still debate whether this labor reflected a real ancient irrigation feat or was just moral satire. But either way, It's about as glamorous as cleaning a god's litter box. Heracles arrives, breathing through his mouth. You follow at a distance, because frankly, you value your nose. The stench rolls in waves, sour, earthy, biblical. Even the flies seem traumatized. Augeas greets him, with a smile too wide to trust. If you can clean all this by sunset, he says, I'll give you 1/10 of my cattle. Hera probably leans over Olympus' balcony at that moment, whispering, This will be fun. Heracles surveys the disaster, his expression unreadable. For once, brute strength won't cut it. You can't club manure to death. So he walks the perimeter, studying the landscape like a man quietly planning revenge on geometry itself. Then he sees it, the rivers, Alpheus and Peneus, snaking lazily nearby, and that's when the idea hits him. He digs 2 deep channels with his bare hands, no small feat, when the ground is half stone, half filth. Sweat streaks his arms, dust clings to his skin. The gods watching must have blinked. With a final heave, he breaks the banks and diverts the rivers straight through the stables. The effect is instant and spectacular. You can almost hear the collective gasp of both mortals and immortals as 2 roaring torrents crash through the filth, sweeping away decades of divine neglect. Cattle bellow, servants scream. Hera probably spills her ambrosia laughing. By sunset, the stables gleam. The rivers sparkle again. The fields downstream, however, will never recover. Heracles stands there, drenched, smelling faintly better than before, and nods once. Done. Augeas, naturally, panics. You cheated, he sputters. You used the rivers. The logic's about as sound as calling plumbing witchcraft. But Augeas refuses to pay. He even claims he never made the deal. Heracles, tired and dripping, doesn't argue yet. Later, Hell returned to settle that score more directly. But for now, the labor stands. When Eurystheus hears how it happened, he disqualifies it again, too clever, apparently. You can almost see the king's scroll now. Tasks completed by intelligence or engineering will not count. Hera nods approvingly. Bureaucracy, her true weapon. But Heracles doesn't seem to care. Maybe for the first time, he's realized that strength isn't just in muscle, it's in knowing where to place a river. Historians still argue whether this marks his evolution from brute hero to cunning problem solver. But you can sense the turning point. He's no longer just surviving the labors, he's outsmarting them. That night, he camps near the now pristine stables, leaning against a rock still damp from the flood. The moonlight glints off puddles that sparkle faintly like silver mirrors. He's quiet, eyes heavy. Maybe he's remembering Megara. Maybe just listening to the sound of running water, the same element that, for a few glorious hours, obeyed him completely. He dozes off, and you imagine the dream that follows. Rivers flowing backward, washing not dirt but guilt from his hands. In the dream, the water whispers, "You're getting closer." At dawn, the valley smells clean for the first time in living memory. Farmers downstream, however, wake up to new deposits of divine fertilizer and 1,000 cows mooing in confusion. Somewhere up on Olympus, Poseidon is probably still trying to figure out why his rivers took a detour. Hera scowls, but Zeus chuckles quietly because, deep down, he loves a loophole. When Heracles wakes, he stretches, shoulders cracking. Another task done. 6 more to go. His tunic is stiff with dried mud, his hands blistered, but there's a faint grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. For the first time, he's not thinking about redemption, he's thinking about momentum. And as he sets off down the valley, the sun rises over the clean white stones, glinting like victory disguised as sanitation. You can almost smell the air clearing, though honestly, let's not linger too long here, because somewhere ahead, in the dark forests of Arcadia, metal wings are waiting to slice the sky, and Heracles' next lesson will involve learning how to fight noise itself. The air grows sharp again as Heracles climbs into the forested slopes of Arcadia, where mist curls like smoke around the treetops. You'd think, after lions, hydras, and catastrophic plumbing, nothing would surprise him anymore. Yet here he is, ordered to drive away a flock of man-eating birds. They're called the Stymphalian birds, bronze-beaked, iron-feathered, shriek machine hybrids that could turn a quiet lake into an apocalypse of clatter. He stops at the edge of the water. The lake looks peaceful, mirror-smooth, until the surface ripples, and suddenly the air vibrates with metallic chatter. Hundreds of wings slice upward, flashing in the light. It's like someone shook a bag of knives. Heracles ducks instinctively as feathers whistle past and bury themselves deep into a cedar trunk. One almost takes off his ear. The birds circle above, their cries so sharp you feel them in your molars. Hera must have curated this one personally. Death by screeching poultry, you imagine her saying. Eurystheus probably nodded solemnly, taking notes for the report. Historians still argue whether these birds represented an allegory for wars, chaos, or just an ancient warning about bad neighbors. But either way, they sound awful. Heracles tries his usual methods first: bow, club, brute yelling. None work. The arrows glance off their armor-like feathers, and the birds scatter before he can close in. He could chase them for days and never win. For once, even his patience wears thin. He sits on a rock, muttering something that sounds suspiciously like "I hate birds." Then Athena appears, or at least her voice, cool and dry as a mountain breeze. She tosses him a pair of bronze crotala, noisemakers forged by Hephaestus himself. They look like cymbals crossed with alarm clocks. "Try a little counter noise," she suggests. Then she's gone, leaving only the faint scent of olive wood and smugness. Heracles blinks, shrugs, and decides to trust the goddess of strategy. He climbs onto a nearby rise overlooking the lake, positions the crotala in his hands, and slams them together. The sound is indescribable. Imagine every church bell, thunderclap, and toddler with a saucepan merging into one glorious, unbearable racket. The forest shakes, the birds panic. Their formation dissolves into chaos. Hundreds take flight at once, their metallic wings clanging like a forge gone mad. You clap your hands over your ears, but Heracles grins wide. He knocks his bow and fires 1, 2, 3. This time, his Hydra-poisoned arrows hit true. The feathers can't stop venom. Wherever they land, the birds drop, silent. The rest flee toward the horizon, darkening the sky like a storm that refuses to return. When it's over, the lake is still again, the water rippling only from the bodies sinking beneath. Heracles lowers his bow, ears ringing. The silence afterward feels holy, like the moment a migraine finally ends. He sets down the crotala carefully, as if afraid they might start clanging again. Historians still debate whether this episode was meant to honor technological ingenuity or divine cooperation, but you can sense a theme building. Each labor adds a new layer. Brain over brawn, restraint over rage. Even the gods seem to notice. Athena, watching from above, smiles faintly, the kind of proud grin teachers hide when the student finally stops smashing everything. Heracles, though, doesn't feel clever. He feels tired. The feathers lie everywhere, sharp as razors. He gathers a few, maybe thinking they'll make decent souvenirs or warning signs for later monsters. The sun breaks through the fog, glinting off metal and water. For a heartbeat, everything looks clean again. Down in Tiryns, Eurystheus hears of the victory and, true to form, decides it doesn't count unless Heracles personally sweeps the lake. Heracles just sighs. You can almost see him rubbing his temples, muttering, "This man needs a hobby," but he's starting to play the long game. He doesn't even argue. He knows that every petty rule Hera invents only proves she's still watching and still losing. That night, he camps near the water's edge. The remaining birds have flown so far that even their echoes can't reach him. The stars above tremble faintly, their reflections rippling across the lake like tiny torches. He sits in silence, turning one of the bronze feathers between his fingers. It catches the light, flashes once, and goes dark. He wonders, maybe for the first time, whether all these creatures were ever truly his enemies, or just guardians of things the gods were too lazy to handle themselves. But before the thought can settle, a gust of wind rattles through the trees, carrying the smell of the sea, a reminder that his next labor lies across the water. Somewhere to the east, on the island of Crete, a bull waits a creature so fierce it once carried a god's favor. then his punishment. Heracles exhales, watching his breath curl like smoke. "Another beast," he murmurs, packing his bow. "Fine, let's dance." The sea breeze hits like a shock of clarity. Salt crusts on your lips, gulls scream overhead, and Heracles boards a creaking ship bound for Crete. Has been sent to capture the Cretan bull, a divine, fire-snorting juggernaut that once carried King Minos' pride and Poseidon's grudge. You can almost imagine Hera suggesting this one over breakfast. How about a rampaging ocean bull? Very on theme. The story goes that Poseidon sent the bull from the sea as a gift to Minos, expecting it to be sacrificed in his honor. But Minos, admiring its beauty, swapped it for a lesser bull and kept the divine one for breeding. Classic hubris. Poseidon, furious, cursed both bull and queen. And somewhere in that family drama, the Minotaur eventually happened. You don't need a family tree. You need therapy. By the time Heracles arrives, Crete is a landscape of wreckage. Fields trampled, fences shredded, farmers shouting from rooftops as if roofs could save them. The bull roams the countryside, a snorting storm of white hide and fury, sunlight flashing off its horns. The ground trembles with each step. Historians still argue whether this bull symbolized Poseidon's wrath or Crete's untamable power. But everyone agrees it was an absolute menace. Heracles steps onto the island barefoot, cloak rippling behind him, and mutters something you can't quite catch. Maybe a curse, maybe a promise. The locals point him toward the hills where the bull's been seen last, and he trudges off without ceremony, the sea glittering cruelly behind him. By noon, he spots it, a shape moving through tall grass, radiant and terrible. The bull lifts its head, steam puffing from its nostrils. Its eyes lock on him, blue fire, unblinking. For a heartbeat, man and beast simply stare, the air between them tight as a bowstring. Then it charges. The impact would kill anyone else. Heracles sidesteps at the last second, grabs the horn, twists. The bull bellows, kicking up dirt and salt. The struggle becomes a blur, white hide flashing, muscles straining, hooves gouging the ground. Heracles digs in, feet sliding. You can hear his breath steady, determined, almost calm. He waits for the moment between charges, the half-second when the beast exhales, and leaps onto its back. The bull bucks wildly, but Heracles locks his arms around its neck, forcing it down. The sound is deafening, like thunder rolling over marble. Finally, with one massive heave, he pins it breath ragged, hands bleeding. And then, something odd happens. The bull stops fighting. It stares at him, nostrils flaring. And for a moment, it almost looks tired, maybe even grateful. The god's cruelty has worn it thin too. Heracles releases his grip slightly, whispering something low, a wordless truce. He binds the bull's legs, guides it gently down to the shore, and loads it onto his ship. It's the quietest crossing in all 12 labours, the man and beast swaying together under a red sunset, neither daring to move. You can imagine the sailors watching, whispering prayers to any deity that would listen. When they dock at Tiryns, Eurystheus takes one look and promptly screams. He dives behind a wall and shouts that the bull should be set free immediately. So Heracles does exactly that. The creature bolts, galloping into the distance, eventually crossing to Marathon where, rumour has it, Theseus will have to deal with it later. Heroism, as always, is a hand-me-down. Historians still debate whether this labour symbolised reconciliation between land and sea, or just a clever cross-reference to Minos' messy mythos. Either way, Heracles' restraint stands out. He didn't kill, didn't boast, didn't even flinch when divine absurdity stared him down. It's as if each labour chips away at the berserker within, leaving something quieter, almost philosophical. That night, he sits on the beach, the waves licking his feet. The stars glimmer across the dark water, reflections trembling like the breath of old gods. The bull's tracks fade into the dunes. You can smell the brine, feel the hum of the sea. He picks up a seashell, turns it in his hand, and smiles small, weary, content. You can almost hear his thoughts. If even a bull can break free of its curse, Maybe I can too, but peace, in Heracles' life, never lingers. Eurystheus' next command already waits, scratched into another self-important scroll. This time, it's horses, carnivorous ones. Because why stop at killer birds when you can have flesh-eating mares? Heracles sighs, stands, and shoulders his club. All right, he murmurs, glancing toward the horizon. Let's see what's for dinner. The tide rolls in, swallowing his footprints, and the moon rises higher, its reflection rippling over the water, like a silver coin tossed into fate's well. The road to Thrace winds through a landscape that looks tired of itself, cracked hills, burnt grass, sky stretched too thin. You follow Heracles north. The wind, carrying the smell of iron and salt, has been sent after Diomedes, king of the Bistones, whose horses feed on human flesh. Yes, flesh-eating mares. Somewhere up on Olympus, Hera must be laughing so hard she spills her nectar. The Bistones are war-mad, loud, and perpetually drunk on their own cruelty. Their stables, perched on a cliff above the Black Sea, echo with the shrieks of those unfortunate enough to become horse feed. The mares themselves, 4 of them, snort smoke, foam crimson, and stamp the ground like living storms. Historians still argue whether they symbolize human savagery or were simply an early form of "don't mess with Thracians" propaganda. But either way, they're nightmare fuel. Heracles arrives at dusk, cloaked in dust and silence. His plan is simple. In, out, no drama. But the gods hate simplicity. The moment he steps inside the camp, the air fills with shouting. Diomedes' men spot him, weapons drawn, the smell of salt and fear thickening the dusk. Heracles doesn't draw his bow. He's beyond that now. He just moves through them like a storm. You hear the thud of clubs, the crash of shields, the startled silence that follows when myth becomes real. Then comes Diomedes himself, tall, cruel-eyed, wearing armor slick with yesterday's victories. "You want my horses?" he sneers. "Feed them yourself." The words are still hanging in the air when Heracles grabs him, effortlessly, by the throat. There's a heartbeat of stillness. Even the horses stop screaming. Then Heracles drags the king toward the stables. You don't need details. You only hear the wind pick up, the sea groaning below. When he emerges, the mares are calm for the first time, their eyes soft, their breath steady. The myth never says whether they understood what had happened, only that afterward, they refused to eat flesh again. Heracles, for his part, simply unties them and begins the long walk back to Tiryns. It's a grim sort of victory. Hes not triumphant, Hes haunted. The fire in him flickers lower each time. Historians still debate whether this episode was about justice or poetic irony, but you can sense it's more personal. Every monster he kills looks a little more human. Every human he defeats feels a little more monstrous. Halfway home, he pauses by a river. The mares graze quietly, their reflections trembling on the surface. He leans on his club, staring into the water. His hands are steady, but his eyes give him away something shifting, the edges of his rage fraying into exhaustion. For a moment, he almost seems ordinary. Then he laughs softly, shaking his head. "Even the horses are tired of blood," he murmurs. When he finally reaches Eurystheus, the king takes one look at the 4 mares tethered outside his gates and promptly hides again, this time behind a decorative pillar. Heracles just rolls his eyes. He's not even angry anymore. It's like watching a teacher deal with a particularly dense student. He turns the mares loose, and they vanish into the plains, never to be seen again. Some say they eventually found peace in the wild. Others whisper that one bore the line of Alexander's horse centuries later. History loves a sequel. That night, Heracles camps by the sea. The wind carries the scent of wild grass and ash. You can almost hear faint hoofbeats on the sand, echoing from somewhere between myth and memory. He doesn't sleep much. He hasn't in years. Instead, he watches the horizon bleed from black to silver, dawn creeping like forgiveness he can't quite believe in. Each labor has been a test of muscle, of cunning, of patience. But this one feels different, heavier. Hes starting to understand that his real punishment isn't the tasks themselves. It's surviving them. The next scroll arrives at sunrise. Eurystheus' messenger, pale and sweating, hands it over as if it might explode. Heracles breaks the seal and reads, "Fetch the belt of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons." A slow smile creeps across his face. "Finally," he says, "something civilized." You can't tell if he's joking or already bracing for disaster. Probably both. The tide rolls in, whispering at his feet. Behind him, the empty plains shimmer. Ahead, across a sea thick with legends, waits an island ruled by warrior women, and one queen who might meet his strength with grace or with a spear. Hera, no doubt, is already plotting. Heracles rises, slings his club, and starts toward the harbour again. "Let's see," he mutters, "how diplomacy goes." The sea smells of iron and rain as Heracles sails east toward the land of the Amazons. The waves slap against the hull like slow applause, and the sky glows bruise purple at the edges. It's the kind of voyage that should feel heroic, but there's an unease beneath the salt. This isn't about killing monsters. It's about negotiation with a queen who owes nothing to gods or men. The Amazons are said to live by their own rules, a society without kings or husbands, trained from birth for war. Their arrows fly straighter than most prayers. Historians still argue whether they were inspired by real warrior tribes near the Black Sea or pure patriarchal panic turned myth. But either way, the legend stands. Cross them at your peril. Heracles' target is Hippolyta's belt, a gift from Ares himself. It's no simple accessory, it marks her authority, a token of divine favor forged in battle. Eurystheus wants it as a trophy. Hera sees a chance to stir chaos, and Heracles just wants to finish this cursed to-do list. He lands at dawn. The shore gleams wet under a red sunrise. No guards attack, no arrows fly. Instead, a group of Amazons approaches tall, silent, eyes like stormlight. Their leader steps forward, and the world seems to hold its breath. Hippolyta, Heracles, ever the soldier, lowers his head respectfully. He expects scorn, maybe threats. Instead, she smiles faintly. "You're the one they call the son of Zeus," she says, voice calm but sharp. "The one who wrestles lions for atonement." He nods. "And you're the queen who answers to no one. I'm told your belt belongs to Ares." "It does," she says, fingers brushing the bronze clasp. "And you want it?" "I need it," he admits, "but not for myself." There's a long pause, the kind that could tilt either toward peace or blood. Then she laughs softly, not unkindly. "Then take it. You've earned enough pain already. It's that simple. No fight, no divine fireworks, just human understanding, a rarity in myth. You almost want to believe it could end here, with mutual respect and quiet departure. But Hera can't stand quiet. Disguised as an Amazon, she slips among the camp, whispering poison. "The stranger plans to steal your queen." The rumor spreads like wildfire. By sunset, the air hums with tension. Drums beat, spears rise. Heracles notices the shift too late. The Amazons charge, eyes blazing. He shouts for them to stop, to listen, but words vanish in the roar. The battle erupts, swift and brutal. Arrows hiss, blades clash, and you can almost taste the dust kicked up by 100 war horses. Hippolyta rides into the fray, trying to halt the chaos, but the confusion is complete. One arrow no one knows whose flies true. It strikes her beneath the collarbone. She gasps once, looks at Heracles, and falls. He catches her before she hits the ground. For a moment, time fractures. Her blood stains his hands, warm and unreal. She smiles faintly, whispering something that sounds like "Tell them I gave it willingly." Then her breath fades. Heracles stands there in silence as the battle winds down, the Amazons retreating in horror at what they've done. He lifts the belt, heavy and cold now, and ties it to his waist, not as a prize, but as a promise. Historians still argue whether Hippolyta's death was part of the original myth or a later addition to moralize the tale. But the tragedy fits. Peace was offered, and Hera's jealousy took it away. Again, when Heracles returns to Tiryns, Eurystheus barely listens to the story. He just ticks another box on his divine spreadsheet. But Heracles doesn't celebrate. That night, he sits alone by the harbour, staring at the belt coiled in his lap. It gleams faintly in the moonlight, a reminder of what understanding costs when gods demand entertainment. He thinks of all the creatures he's fought: lion, hydra, bull, and realizes none of them were as dangerous as a whisper. He can still hear it in the waves, that soft, venomous rumour that turned grace into grief. The wind changes, carrying the smell of distant dust, heat, salt, cattle. His next labour waits beyond deserts and myth, where a three-bodied giant guards a herd under a dying sun. Heracles exhales, tucks the belt into his pack, and stands. "Enough diplomacy," he mutters. Back to monsters. The stars tilt above him, indifferent. You can almost see Hera watching from the clouds, her face unreadable. Maybe she's satisfied, maybe she's bored. Either way, the game continues, and somewhere far to the west, in the red glare of the horizon, Gerion's cattle shift and low, already sensing the approach of the man who never stops walking. By now, the world feels smaller than his weariness. Heracles walks west, where the sky thickens with heat and the air tastes of salt baked into stone. The oracle's words still echo in his skull: "Cleanse your soul through toil." But the desert doesn't care for prophecy. This is the realm of Geryon, the three-bodied giant. And somewhere beyond those molten cliffs, crimson cattle graze in a landscape too vast for forgiveness. It's a long journey, maybe the longest of them all. He crosses Libyan sands, where the horizon melts like glass. The soles of his feet split. His club grows heavier. At one point, the sun stares down at him so fiercely that he stops, glares right back, and according to legend, draws his bow on it. You can almost hear the gods holding their breath. Apollo laughs from his chariot. Helios, amused or impressed, hands him a golden cup to use as a boat, a cosmic carpool, myth's way of saying, "Fine, you win, take a ride." So Heracles sails across the ocean in a giant glowing cup, drifting toward the farthest edge of the known world. It's a surreal sight. A demigod in a chalice, rowing through sunset, the sea blazing red beneath him. Historians still argue whether this represents the heroes, symbolic crossing into the land of death, or just ancient poets getting poetic. But it feels like both. When he reaches Erythea, the red island, he steps onto a shore that looks alive. The sand gleams like embers, and in the distance, Gerion's herd moves slowly, horns glinting gold. Guarding them is Eurytion, a shepherd built like a small mountain, and his hound, Orthrus, a two-headed descendant of Cerberus, because Greek monsters never travel light. Orthrus spots Heracles first. The dog charges, both mouths foaming, both growling in stereo. Heracles doesn't hesitate. One swing of his club, and silence falls. Eurytion rushes forward, axe raised, but he falls too, the echo swallowed by the endless dunes. There's no malice in Heracles' eyes, just the dull efficiency of a man who's forgotten how to stop moving. Then the ground trembles. Geryon appears on the horizon. 3 torsos fused into one being. 6 arms gripping 6 weapons. Wings unfurling with a sound like cracking thunder. His voice booms across the valley. "You kill my kin, you steal my herd." Heracles doesn't answer. He just lifts his bow. The arrow whistles through the air, tipped with hydra venom, and sinks deep into Geryon's side. The giant staggers, all 3 heads, crying out in harmony, a sound like a mountain collapsing. When he falls, the dust rolls for miles. Silence again. The cattle, red as rubies in the dying light, scatter and regroup, sniffing the air around their fallen master. Heracles wipes the sweat from his brow, his hand trembling slightly. Hes killed monsters before, but this feels different. Less victory, more necessity. Historians still debate whether Geryon was meant as a villain or just another guardian doing his job. But you can feel Heracles starting to ask the same question. He gathers the herd, drives them slowly east. The journey back takes months. He sleeps beside the animals, guards them through storms, talks to them when loneliness becomes too heavy. You can almost hear the conversations, half confessions, half lullabies. He tells them about Megara, about Hera's hatred, about how even gods seem to need him broken. The cattle don't answer, of course, but they listen. Maybe that's enough. Along the way, obstacles pile up like bad omens. Hera sends gadflies to sting the cattle, scattering them across mountains and rivers. Heracles curses, chases, gathers them again. Bandits try to steal a few. He leaves none alive. At one point, the herd refuses to cross a river, so he wades in first, shoulder deep, coaxing them gently. You'd almost think he's gone soft until you remember his arrows still drip venom. By the time he reaches Greece again, the sun is low, and his beard is grey with dust. Eurystheus meets him at the city gates, eyes wide, counting the shimmering beasts. Then, in a move that surprises absolutely no one, the king announces he has no facilities for livestock and orders the cattle sacrificed to Hera. Heracles says nothing. Maybe he's too tired, or maybe he's learned that arguments against divine pettiness go nowhere. He releases the cattle, lets them wander free, their red hides glowing against the twilight. For a moment, the scene feels almost sacred atonement, disguised as surrender. That night, he rests on a hillside overlooking the plain. The herd grazes below, silent, except for the occasional lowing that echoes like thunder softened by distance. The wind cools the sweat on his skin. Somewhere in the darkness, you imagine Hera watching, lips pressed thin, realizing she can humiliate him, but never stop him. Historians still argue whether this labor symbolized colonial conquest or spiritual endurance, but in the hush that follows, it doesn't matter. The stars burn faintly over the plain, their light trembling like tired applause. Heracles lies back, closes his eyes, and listens to the slow rhythm of the cattle bells, a lullaby written in exhaustion. Hess, almost done now. Only 2 labors left, one among the golden apples of immortality, guarded by a sleepless dragon, and one at the very gates of death. But tonight, for the first time, you can sense it, his journey curving toward its end, like a bowstring slackening after too many pulls. He exhales, long and steady, whispering to no one. Almost there. Dawn comes pale and cold, and you can almost feel the air hum with unfinished business. Heracles' next task sounds deceptively beautiful. Fetch the golden apples of the Hesperides. Simple words hiding impossible geography. The apples grow in a garden at the edge of the world, tended by nymphs and guarded by a dragon that never sleeps. Even for him, this feels like myth within myth. A dream he has to outwit, not overpower. He doesn't know where to start. So, he walks. West again. Beyond mountains, deserts, the last traces of civilization. The world starts to blur at the edges, as if the gods themselves have stopped painting past this point. Along the way, he meets strangers who seem more symbol than flesh. One of them is Nereus, the old man of the sea, who can change shape faster than thought. Heracles catches him by surprise, holding tight through a dozen transformations, fish, flame, eagle, snake, until the old god sighs and gives up. All right, he wheezes. The garden lies beyond Atlas, but you'll need the Titan's help to reach it. Heracles lets him go, and Nereus vanishes into the tide. You can almost hear the waves laughing. Days blur into weeks. The land turns strange. Trees with silver bark, air thick with amber light. Finally, he reaches the edge of the known world, a ridge where the sky leans low and mountains crumble into mist. And there, holding up the heavens like a ceiling gone wrong, stands Atlas, his muscles strained beneath the weight of eternity, veins glowing faintly blue. You can hear the quiet groan of the world pressing down through his spine. Atlas squints at the newcomer. You're smaller than most fools who ask for favors, he rumbles. Heracles chuckles. I'm not asking for favors, just a little help. He explains his quest, the golden apples, the dragon, the king who won't stop sending errands. Atlas listens, amused. That dragon's my child, you know, he says, a hint of pride in his thunderous voice. Ladon, good guardian, doesn't nap. Then maybe you'd like to fetch the apples yourself. Heracles offers, smiling just enough to look like he means it. I'll hold the sky for a bit. Stretch your legs. It's a gamble, and Atlas takes it. He grins, massive teeth flashing. Deal. The world shudders as he eases the heavens onto Heracles' shoulders. The weight slams down, crushing, cosmic, endless. You can feel it just watching. The sky pressing through his bones, the air vibrating with celestial tension. For a moment, he almost collapses, knees digging into the earth. The sound of it isn't thunder, it's deeper. A hum that never stops. Time loses meaning. Could be minutes, could be days. All he knows is strain and the faint memory of sunlight. Eventually, footsteps return. Atlas stands before him, grinning, 3 gleaming apples cradled in one hand. They glow like captured sunsets, warm and heavy with immortality. "I'll tell you what," Atlas says. "I'll take these to your king myself." "I like being free." Heracles, sweating, nods as if agreeing. "Of course, just one favor first. Hold this for a moment while I adjust my cloak. These shoulders aren't what they used to be." Atlas laughs massive, careless, and shifts the burden back onto himself. The instant the sky settles on his shoulders, Heracles picks up the apples and steps away. "Thanks, friend," he says, voice light. "I'll make sure your service is remembered." Atlas roars, but it's too late. Heracles is already walking, the apples burning faintly in his hands. Historians still argue whether this trick was meant to showcase cleverness or divine irony, but you can sense the fatigue behind it. Each labor has turned cunning into survival instinct. This isn't triumph. It's endurance wrapped in wit. He begins the long journey back, the apples pulsing softly in his pack. Some say he stopped along the way to rest at the garden itself, where the Hesperides sang in voices like wind through glass. Others say he never looked back once. Either way, the apples remain warm, their light reflecting in his eyes like small suns. When he reaches Tiryns, Eurystheus doesn't even touch them. He orders the apples returned to Athena, who dutifully places them back in their garden because no mortal, not even Heracles, is meant to keep immortality. It's almost funny. 12 labors to prove his worth, and even the fruit of eternal life gets repossessed. That night, Heracles sits outside the palace walls, staring at the stars. He wonders if Atlas is still laughing under his celestial load. The thought makes him grin. The wind carries a chill from the underworld, cold, still, final. He shivers, though not from fear. His next labor, his last, will lead him there. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally, the gates of Hades, guarded by the dog of death himself. He rises slowly, stretching his shoulders as if still remembering the sky's weight. The stars above flicker, ancient and unmoved. "All right," he says quietly. "Let's finish this." The path narrows until it stops pretending to be a road at all, just rock, mist, and echoes. You follow Heracles as he heads toward the last frontier of every myth, the underworld. The 12th labor, Eurystheus' grand finale, is absurd, even by divine standards. Bring back Cerberus, the 3-headed guard dog of Hades, alive. No killing, no shortcuts. Just stroll into the realm of the dead and borrow its watchdog. Hera must have cackled for days when she suggested this one. Heracles reaches the promontory at Cape Tanarum, where a cave yawns like an open wound in the world. The wind that seeps from it smells of stone dust and burnt myrrh. He lights a torch, though the flame seems hesitant, as if it knows what's coming. Then he steps inside. At first, there's sound the steady drip of water, the crunch of gravel underfoot, but the deeper he goes, the less the world remembers how to make noise. Even breathing feels intrusive. The tunnel widens into a corridor of pale rock, then a plain lit by no source you can see. Souls drift like moths in a grey current, murmuring in forgotten tongues. Heracles walks through them, respectful, the torch dimming, as if bowing to the place's authority. Historians still argue whether this journey represented literal descent or spiritual trial, but you can feel it either way. Every labor so far has stripped something from him: rage, pride, ignorance, and this one will demand the last piece: fear. He reaches the Styx, its surface still as glass. Charon waits in his skiff, skeletal hands gripping the oar. "You're not dead," the ferryman rasps. "Working on it," Heracles mutters, tossing him a coin. The humor is thin, but it breaks the silence. Charon studies the demigod, then nods once, and they cross. The water makes no sound, yet the air hums like an unseen choir sighing in its sleep. On the far shore, shadows gather heroes he once admired, now pale silhouettes. Theseus, chained for his past arrogance. Ascalaphus, the tattletale of Persephone's pomegranate, still sulking. Even his old music teacher Linus drifts by, looking unimpressed. You can almost see Heracles cringe. "Still terrible with rhythm," Linus murmurs before fading again. Then the palace appears. Black marble, veined with faint light, standing in impossible stillness. Hades himself waits at the gates, calm as gravity. Beside him, Persephone, half spring, half sorrow. Heracles kneels. "Lord of the dead, I've come to borrow your dog." Hades raises an eyebrow. "Most ask for mercy. You ask for my pet? Only for a while," Heracles says. Eurystheus demands it. "I don't intend to harm him," the god considers. "Maybe he's bored, maybe impressed, maybe both. You may take him," he says slowly, "if you can subdue him without weapon or trick." A low growl rolls from the darkness. Cerberus emerges, 3 heads, 6 eyes, a mane like burning pitch. Each mouth drools poison that hisses on the stone. The sound of his breathing shakes the cavern. You can feel the vibration in your chest. Heracles sets down his club, drops his bow. He steps forward with empty hands. The creature lunges, one head snapping at his shoulder, another at his throat, the third bellowing a sound that feels like dying stars. Heracles meets it head-on, wrapping his arms around the central neck, forcing the beast down inch by inch. The claws rake his sides, teeth graze his skin, but he holds tighter, murmuring something low and steady, not a threat, not a prayer, just a rhythm, almost like the heartbeat of the living world, reminding the dead what it sounds like. Cerberus' struggle slows. The heads snarl, then whine softly. For the first time, the dog seems to remember what loyalty feels like. Hades watches, unreadable. When Heracles finally releases his grip, the creature doesn't attack again. It simply stands, breathing heavily. All 3 faces turn toward him. "You have your prize," Hades says. "Take him, and return him when you're done." His tone holds a strange respect. Few mortals leave here alive. Fewer still do it politely. So Heracles leads Cerberus upward. The journey back is slower, the dog reluctant, the world tightening around them. When they emerge into sunlight, both blink, disoriented. The creature's black fur glints like wet obsidian. Its eyes shimmer green against the day. Farmers drop their tools and flee. Eurystheus predictably screams, diving headfirst into yet another storage jar. Heracles laughs tired, genuine, maybe the first real laugh in years. He strokes one of the dog's heads before leading him back toward the cave. "You've been kind," he says quietly. "Let's get you home." Once Cerberus disappears into the darkness again, the earth seems to sigh. The gate closes, and the air above it clears. Historians still debate whether this descent symbolized purification or reconciliation with death. But you can sense the truth beneath the metaphor. He didn't conquer the underworld, he made peace with it. For the first time, Heracles seems lighter, as if the darkness accepted him and returned him slightly repaired. When he walks away from Taenarum, the sea wind catches his cloak, the lion's mane flutters, the horizon gleams gold. Somewhere far off, Hera watches silently. Maybe, just maybe, she's done. But the story isn't finished. There's one more thing no labor can wash away. Mortality itself. And soon, Heracles will meet it, not in battle, but in flame. He glances back once at the cave, smiles faintly, and whispers, almost free. The world feels quieter now, as if even Olympus is holding its breath. Heracles has completed his labors, every monster slain, every trial endured, every ounce of his mortal body worn thin. But the gods, as you've probably noticed by now, never let peace come easily. He returns to Thebes for a time, carrying no trophies, wearing no crown. The people cheer, yet he looks distant, as though his eyes have seen too far beyond human things to ever rest again. The lion's pelt still drapes across his shoulders, but it's faded now, more memory than armor. Historians still argue whether the labors ended here or continued into countless side quests. But the myth agrees on one final truth. Peace was always going to be temporary. Heracles meets Deianira, a princess, fierce and kind, and for a while, he almost believes he can be happy. They marry, build a quiet life, and if this were a gentler story, that's where it would end. But the wheel of myth doesn't stop. It only turns slower before the next fall. One day, they come to a river, swollen with rain. A centaur named Nessus offers to carry Deianira across while Heracles swims. But halfway through, Nessus decides to abduct her instead. Heracles reacts on instinct. One arrow, still tipped with Hydra's poison, flies from the bank and pierces the centaur's back. As he dies, Nessus whispers to Deianira, "Keep my blood, it will keep his love true." You can see where this is going. Years later, Heracles takes up another campaign, another king to overthrow, another test of strength for a man who's tired of proving he has any. When he sends word for Deianira to join him, she remembers the centaur's words and soaks a robe in his blood, thinking it's a charm, not a curse. She sends it with love. When Heracles puts on the robe, the poison wakes. It burns, not like fire but like betrayal itself, slow, deliberate, irreversible. The fabric clings, fusing with his skin. He tears at it, but it only spreads. You can almost hear his roar shake the sky, half agony, half rage. The smell of smoke follows, the kind that only comes from flesh meeting godly venom. Deianira, realizing what she's done, takes her own life. Heracles stumbles into the mountains, desperate for air, for relief, for an ending that means something. He climbs Mount Oeta, every step a prayer he can't remember how to say. The villagers follow from a distance, too afraid to help, too awed to turn away. At the summit, he builds a pyre. He lies upon it, his skin still smouldering. "Set it alight," he says to a friend, "before I burn from the inside out." No one dares, until a passing traveller, said to be the future hero Philoctetes, steps forward. Heracles smiles faintly. "You'll do. Take my bow. Take the fire." The flames catch quickly. You can almost feel the heat. See it reflected in his eyes. There's no scream, just a sigh, as if all the weight of the labours, the grief, the guilt, the glory, finally lifts. For a heartbeat, the wind pauses. Then thunder splits the clouds. Zeus descends. His voice rolls across the mountain, heavy with something like pride. "Enough, my son. Come home." The mortal shell burns away. From the ashes, light rises a shimmer that's almost human, almost divine. Heracles ascends through the smoke, leaving behind the body that bore every burden. On Olympus, he's greeted not as punishment's pawn but as family. Even Hera, they say, finally smiles and offers her hand. Historians still argue whether that's reconciliation or poetic closure, but it feels right, the long war between God and man closing on a quiet truce. Down below, the fire burns out. The mountain wind scatters the ash. Somewhere in the valley, the people build shrines, whispering that their hero isn't dead, just promoted. And in a way, he is. He becomes constellation muscle, turned to stars, labours turned to lessons. You can look up on any clear night and still trace him. Bow drawn, lion's mane flowing, forever caught between sky and earth. Maybe that's the secret the myths were hiding all along, that strength isn't what keeps you alive. It's what makes your ending matter. The flames fade, the story slows, the hero sleeps. The fires on Oeta dim to embers, their light softening to the pulse of a distant hearth. You can almost feel the warmth lingering at the edges of the dark, the kind that no longer burns but comforts. The sky above, once thunder bright, deepens into a calm blue velvet, where the stars shimmer like quiet applause. You breathe with the rhythm of the story now slow, steady, the way Heracles must have breathed when the weight of the world finally slipped off his shoulders. The mountains settle, the sea sighs, even the gods seem to lean back, letting silence take its turn. Down in Thebes, the people sleep beneath the constellations, dreaming of lions tamed, rivers rerouted, monsters made small. Somewhere, a storyteller finishes his wine, murmurs the final line, and closes the scroll. And you, listening, are part of that long, unbroken thread, one mortal heartbeat connected to another. Across 3,000 years of retelling, you've walked beside the strongest man in myth and watched him discover that every fight, every loss, every laugh was leading here to peace. So, take a breath. Let the night wrap itself around you. Let your thoughts loosen like smoke on the mountain air. The stars are steady, the world is quiet, and somewhere, high above, Heracles rests, no longer suffering, no longer striving, just shining,